Yo, welcome back to another episode of whatever this is. But today we are going to talk about a question that I get asked quite a bit. I actually got asked twice today. But which LS engine should you choose for your swap? It's a pretty common question. Hopefully this video goes as viral as my cheap LS swap video did, because I feel like this is a much more important video for people that watch this channel. I assume most of the people that watch this channel are new to the LS swap stuff, because this channel is about helping new people with LS swaps. So, hopefully you haven't bought an engine yet, because after you watch this, you're probably going to be like, I shouldn't have bought that engine. So, let's start with what I know the least about. So, disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I don't know everything about everything. I might be saying something and might not be 100% correct. I'm just going to be talking about a lot of stuff, so stuff might get mixed up. If there's something I talk about that you know more about, just comment it and let us all know. You can be mean to me if you want to. It's not gonna hurt my feelings. But let's start with Gen 5. So, Gen 5 started in 2014, and it's what's being made or put in any Chevy V8 now. It's every Chevy V8 right now. They are considered LT motors. I still call them LS. I call Gen 3 LS. I call Gen 4 LS. I call Gen 5 LS. I'll call Gen 6 LS. If you got to get super technical with it, then I'm not that guy. They're all LS engines. Gen 5. So, Gen 5 is the most expensive. If you go down my channel, there's a tan OBS that I swapped, and that guy originally had bought a Gen 5 LT with a 6L80, and we were going to go that route, and I've never touched one before. I have no interest in touching one. I'll probably never buy one. They are not that good of motors. Every generation has cam and lifter issues. Gen 5, they have them a lot, but all the gens do, so you can't really single Gen 5 out to that. That they are not cheap, but you get the most stock horsepower. So say you got a stock 4.8 or 5.3. I don't know off the top of my head the actual horsepower rating, but as you go up in each generation, the stock horsepower is higher, Gen 5 being the highest. They're direct injection engines, so they actually have a fuel pump under the intake. It's completely different from Gen 4 and Gen 3. It's a completely different monster. They're not cheap. The aftermarket support is tiny. There's not much. For anybody wanting to do an LS swap and is new to this, I would highly recommend staying away from Gen 5. They don't have power steering pumps. They have vacuum pumps. The 6L80s let me backtrack. Harnesses are stupid. I say stupid expensive. They're stupid expensive to me because I've shown you guys throughout all my videos the cheap Amazon, eBay harnesses. Completely different. These, if I remember for that OBS, the guy, he had bought the harness and the computer, and I think the throttle body computer through PSI, and it was like $2,200 plus tax and everything just for the harness. And then you gotta configure motor mounts, oil pan, depending on what vehicle it is. If you want to put a power steering pump, so brackets. If you have thousands to spend and you don't care and you want a good stock high horsepower engine, Gen 5 is where you want to go, but I'm not the guy to give you any help because I stay away. So that's my limited knowledge on Gen 5. I don't know much. I don't care. I never will. Maybe this will give you a good reference to go Google more info because maybe you're interested in it because you want to stock 5.3 making 415 horsepower without having to do a cam or anything. So highest horsepower stock engine you can get, but pain. That's up to you. Whatever you want. Gen 4. I have more knowledge on Gen 4 than I do Gen 5, but it's not. It's better than Gen 5 obviously because Gen 5 is just a pain. With Gen 4, so it'll be from they made these in late 07 until early 2014. They have cam lifter issues just like all of them. But if you're swapping a Gen 4 into any vehicle, you have to do the AFM DOD delete. There's no going around it. You have to do it. So that means you got to pull the heads, you got to pull the lifters, you got to pull the cam, you got to do the DOD delete, which is like a plate. Some smash roller bearings into the valley thing holes. I don't know. You know what I'm talking about, or you don't. So you'll look it up. But you have to do the AFM DOD delete. The aftermarket support is much bigger than Gen 5. It has higher stock horsepower than the Gen 3 stock engines, so that's always a good start. Really, they're just the cam. So these are 53 tooth reluctor wheel. I always get confused. Yeah, 53, 50 something. And the cam sensor is actually on the front cover, which is different than Gen 3. But there's not much. I'm starting to see more of these on Marketplace. They're cheaper than the Gen 5, but they're more expensive than the Gen 3s. So let me backtrack. So Gen 5, I'm in Texas, I'm in the middle of Texas. Gen 5 engines are generally around, so like a 4.8 or 5.3. Do they make 4.8s, 5.3s? Yeah. They're thousands, so it's not like Gen 3, you pick one up for $500. These are thousands, no matter what. These are 1,000 plus Gen 4. But they're good engines to start with to build some horsepower, naturally aspirated, because stock they're higher horsepower than Gen 3. So like the 4.8, 5.3, I don't know exactly the horsepower rating, but I know it's higher than a 4.8 or 5.3 from a Gen 3 because I know the horsepower rating for those. You gotta do the AFM DOD delete. You gotta put an oil pump in it. That's automatic. You're tearing it apart anyways. Stop putting the high pressure or high volume oil pumps in these engines. All you're gonna do is suck the pan dry. Just get you a standard Melling oil pump. Aftermarket support's good. It's definitely not as small as Gen 5. Not as cheap as Gen 3, but cheaper than Gen 5. That's really it for that. Now Gen 3, what I know the most about. Well, it is the cheapest, obviously. The aftermarket support is insane. There's absolutely everything aftermarket-wise for them. The harnesses are stupid cheap, like I've showed you throughout this whole channel. The ECUs are cheap, $160 on eBay. Now that's just one that's had the VATs deleted and all the things you need deleted just to start up your swap. That's not 160 isn't for one that's tuned for a cam. They're plentiful. They're everywhere, absolutely everywhere. The prices are getting stupid. So even though I say they're the cheapest, they're not as cheap as they used to be. Here in Texas, where I'm at in Texas, which would be Temple, Texas, I've seen them sell, I'm talking about like a 4.8, 5.3 with high miles like $750 and up. The junkyards around here, insane. For a 4.8 or 5.3 complete with harness and computer, which you don't use anyways anymore because you just get the cheap harness. There's no sense in wasting your time reworking the factory harness. $1,400 from the junkyard. So, yeah. Now, I'm going to get a little bit more technical with these engines because I know a little bit more about them than I do the Gen 4, Gen 5. Your 99 and 2000 6.0s, so your LQ4s, they have cast iron heads and the cranks are a little bit longer. So with those engines, say you want to put a turbo 350, a turbo 400, a 700 R4, 200 R4 power glide, you don't have to use a spacer, which is interesting. And I believe it's all 6.0 flex plates, or maybe it's just a 99. Google this. My info in my head about these is a lot, so I forget and remember sometimes. But I believe you don't need a different flywheel either. I believe the 60, the 99, 2000, 60 flywheels are all you need. I feel like that's wrong, but I feel like it's right. Let me know. 99 to 02 is all drive-by cable, and basically all of them have EGR. If you see I see it all the time. 2001 Chevy 5.3 engine, only 120 miles. Always add at least 100,000 miles to what they tell you it has, because then that's what it really has. They either say, 120,000, 140, or 180. It's never any other numbers. I don't know why. That's just what they choose, but never believe them unless you run the VIN number, blah, blah, blah. 9902, they all have, on the fuel rail, they all have, for the truck engines, truck and SUV engines, they all have inlet for the fuel to go in, and they have a return on the fuel rail. 03 and up is returnless, so it only has an inlet. For your car engines, I believe, I'm actually wrong about this. So, because I brought up car engines, it made me remember. Gen 3 engines started in 1997 in the Corvettes. I believe like 98, 97, 98, maybe 99, they also have a return system on the fuel rail. Don't quote me, Google it. Just tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. But I believe that's what it is. You can get an LS1, all aluminum. They have the LS1 and they have the LS6. The LS6 was rated at 400 horsepower, 400, 415, 400 I think. And the LS2, I believe, was rated at 400. So LS2 would have come in your 04 to 06 GTOs. 01 and up 6.0s in your SUVs and your trucks, so the iron block 6.0s. That's when they started aluminum heads. So that's I mentioned that just because that's an easy way to tell if it's an 01 and up, unless they obviously swapped heads, but very rarely do you come across that. They have the LQ4 and the LQ9 for the 6.0s. The only difference in the LQ4 and LQ9 is the pistons. The LQ4 are dish pistons and the LQ9 are flat top. I think there's a little bit of difference in the cam, but it's literally not much. I think the lift on an LQ9 is like 460 60 something for 70 something. It's small. It's super low. Well, super low compared to aftermarket cams, obviously. But that's the difference in the LQ4, LQ9. LQ4, LQ9, the 6.0s. That's a good way to build you a cheap LS3. So they have a 4-inch bore, and you can put LS3 top end on it. So you take the LS3 heads and the LS3 intake, and put it on a 6.0, and not technically, you have a iron block LS3. You can't do that with the 4.8, 5.3, or 5.7 because the cylinder bore isn't big enough. I believe an LS1 is a 3.91 bore, and then the 5.3 is smaller, obviously, and the 4.8 is smaller. But yeah, the two highest horsepower engines you can get for Gen 3 are the LS6 and the LS2. The LQ9 is the next one down, so it'd be third in line. Those were rated at 345 horsepower. LQ4 is rated at 325. 5.3 was rated at 315. 4.8 was rated at 295 or 305. Anyone you get, depending on what you're going for, is a great engine to just stick in, bone stock, and just drive. Obviously, the 6.0s, the LS1 or the LS6, and the LS2s, if you want to get good naturally aspirated horsepower, those are the engines you want. 4.853, you're not going to get much naturally aspirated out of them, no matter what cam or head you put on them, because they're just internally they're just smaller. So that's why everybody turbos them, supercharger, whatever. Cheap harnesses, cheap ECUs, plentiful, big aftermarket. Cheapest, like I said, I just want to go back. Cheap, I mean cheapest compared to these. They're not as cheap as they used to be. Even doing a Gen 3 LS swap can get expensive. I've tried to show y'all how not to make them expensive, but if you're paying somebody to do it, no matter which engine you choose, it's going to be expensive. I'm not going to go over transmissions because I am not anywhere near as knowledgeable about transmissions as I am the Gen 3 LS engines. So it's best for you to find somebody much more knowledgeable about that. If you're asking, if the questions I get about which engine, you guys are asking for my personal preference. My personal preference is what is the cheapest. If you don't want to go as cheap as I do, bump it up to Gen 4 because you get some good stock horsepower, throw a cam in it, get some good naturally aspirated horsepower, because the aftermarket is still good enough to where it's not like Gen 5 where you got one option for this and that's what you have to pay. One thing I noticed recently, which I'm kind of glad I waited to do this video. So I believed for the longest, because physically I hadn't seen it online, that after Gen 3 you couldn't get cheap harnesses. Well, I saw that somebody posted in the Facebook group they had a cheap Gen 4 harness off of eBay for like $200. So might be getting into Gen 4s, but those are all drive-by-wire intakes. I'm pretty sure you can swap them to 4-bolt drive-by cable. Haven't done it, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you how. Gen 5, stay away. Just don't even look. Just look over there. Don't even. If you want to be over here, you're on your own. Because no, just don't do it. Whoa. But that's about it. I'm trying to think, because I'm probably going to forget some things and then cut this video and then be, oh, I should have said that. But yeah, if you just want to build a cruiser like this Rust Bucket, just find you a cheap Gen 3 that doesn't need to be rebuilt. Change the oil pump. Always change the oil pump. I don't care if you saw the engine running with good oil pressure. Change the oil pump. throw a cam in it if you want to. It's just when you throw a cam in it, you got to get it tuned, and then you got to do a mail order tune, and then 9 times out of 10, those aren't the best, and then you got to spend 500 on a tuner that might be local, might not be. It's just there's a whole thing to it. So just grab you a stock Gen 3 engine, because even a stock 4.8 like what I have in here is light years ahead of any stock old school engine you have in the vehicle right now. Light years. I've said it a million times. In this CUDA, with just a bone stock 4.8 and a 4060, I can cruise, well, and 323 gears, that makes a difference. I can cruise in the left lane in Texas, where it's Mad Max 24/7. 80, 85, as long as I want to. No issues. So, if you want to build a high naturally aspirated engine, you get you a Gen 3 and you can bore it, stroke it, spend thousands and thousands on it. Or you can start with a Gen 4, do the same, or you can turbo it, whichever, blah, blah, blah. But just a cruiser, cheap Gen 3, doesn't need to be rebuilt, change the oil pump, get you a cheap harness, cheap ECU, like I've showed in the videos, throw it in, and just drive it. Well, that's it. If you have any questions, I put my socials down in the description. If there's something I didn't mention, please comment it so that you let everybody else know, along with myself. If I messed up on something, I apologize. It's about 3,000 degrees here in Texas and about 4,000 in my garage. So, also, stop contacting me for a swap and we talk forever and then you ghost me, because it really hurts my feelings. But anyways, hope this helps. Now, go swap something and drive it.